Story 1. I was briefly employed at Hooters about a decade ago in college. The uniform was uncomfortable mostly due to the weather. It was autumn and winter, and with it being baseball playoffs and football season, the clientele could get pretty rowdy, and the comments could be unpleasant. However, the tips made up for it. I waited tables for a long time, and I have never made that much money consistently. I am talking about $500 on a Tuesday, and I was the first cut. Story 2. I worked at Twin Peaks. It was weird. We were not allowed to order from the customer menu and had to order from a spa menu that featured super low-calorie options. I also got docked once because my hair was not glam enough. I had straightened it instead of curling it one day. Not sure how I got the job to begin with because they only have one size pair of shorts for you to try on in the interview, and they were about 3 sizes too small. Story 3. Did Twin Peaks for 2 years. The uniform didn't bother me because I used to dance competitively, so I was comfortable in revealing clothes. What got to me was having to be on all the time, even when dealing with disrespectful customers. I left for bartending instead. Story 4. Dude here who worked at Hooters. Dishwasher and then fry cook. Uniform was a Hooters t-shirt. It would get soaked with sweat from the radiating heat of 7 or more deep fryers, caked up with flour and raw chicken from breading the wings, and by the end of an 8-hour shift I looked more like a breaded chicken wing than a 17-year-old male. I did not get laid. Story 5. I worked for a private catering company in college. We dressed professionally attractive and served food to wealthy individuals who were part of a private beach club. Comments were outrageous, but so were the tips. Also, there were lots of swingers and the drama was amazing. Story 6. I did briefly at a place with Velcro Scottish skirts. I'm attractive, but my friend, who is Helen of Troy level, got me the job. I had recently lost my first post-college job in my field. In spite of the Scottish theme, the boss must not have liked redheads because I was the only one, and I was given a skirt nearly twice as long as the other girls. At the time, I was pretty self-conscious about that. I would put the skirt on and sing, "I went to college," every day. I ended up chatting with a customer who ultimately hired me back into my actual career, where I have since been successful. Story 7. I worked at Hooters for about a year and a half when I was in between college and medical school and part of medical school. Part of the uniform is thick brown leggings, so to be honest, it felt more like wearing a tank top with leggings and shorts over that. I will say, they run a tight ship, Hooters of America. I can't speak to any of the franchises, as a restaurant could be either. They have very high standards for their waitresses, to the point that when I picked up a shift at a local independent restaurant my husband worked at, when I was a resident I made fantastic money, at least compared to what I was used to making as a resident, and was mentioned in a Google review. To be honest, people were sometimes really mean, more than they were inappropriate. A non-insignificant number of guys seemed to want to be mean as sort of some revenge against the hot chick from their high school, but I wasn't the hot chick from their high school. I actually applied for the job because I was so shy I had trouble talking to people, and I decided to fix it by being thrown into the deep end. People were also very condescending and acted like we were extremely stupid, but most of the girls were great local college students. I think the saddest I've ever seen anyone is when I told a man wearing a Phi Beta Kappa pin, "Oh, I'm a member of that." I was also surprised it was much more family-friendly than I had expected. Hooters' ideal is girl next door, so you can only have natural hair colors, 2 lobe piercings in each ear, though people could get away with this one more than some of the others, especially since you have to wear your hair down. Tattoos must be covered, and I had to give up my nose stud during my year and a half. There are coloring pages, hula hoops, and so on for kids to play with, and honestly, it's a bunch of college girls, so any baby or kid brought in is the star of the restaurant because everyone wants to play with them. We once had a 12-year-old girl making beaded bracelets at one table, and every single girl, I think, stopped by to ask about it and see what she was doing. But I would say it is somewhere I would be totally fine or happy to bring my kids, especially because it's supposed to be chaotic in there, and no one cares about the kids dropping fries on the floor. One woman I would see there fairly regularly, I think, was a caseworker for Child Protective Services and would bring the kids there for lunch for their check-in. I actually think it's a great idea because if they had a history of being sexually abused by an older man, Hooters is a pretty safe place in terms of being a public place, and all the workers around you are young women. Story 8. I worked for the Tilted Kilt when I was 18. I made great money compared to my college peers, but that was pretty much the only positive out of the experience. Men were unpleasant, but you kind of go in expecting that. The worst part for me was actually the other girls. I was very fit and attractive at the time, in a situation where being attractive determined things like how good of a section you got at work, so all these other attractive girls were in constant competition with each other. I was severely bullied. It got so bad that one of them drugged me at a party because it was funny. Then they did it to another girl at work because they were mad at her, and the police ended up being called because she made a scene. Story 9. I worked at Hooters for 2 years during my freshman and sophomore years of college. I went through their trainer program and taught other employees how to excel as well. I look back at it as one of the most formative experiences of my life. I had close relationships with many of the women I worked with. It was like being in a sorority but better because we made money. I learned the hustle, how to put on a face and go out there, bring the vibes, and tap into confidence to control conversations. I also learned how to be firm on boundaries and developed interpersonal skills that I still use in my present-day life. The money was really good. I was able to support myself through college, and I had a lot of fun getting to know the various people who came in. As a Hooters girl, you were allowed to rest a cheek on a stool and chat for a while. There were people from all walks of life and not nearly as many creeps as you'd imagine, at least outwardly. The only major creep I encountered was a really old man asking me to come close and then whispering in my ear, wondering what type of underwear I had on. It definitely made me uncomfortable, but my male manager then took over serving the table, and that was that. There was also some nonsense. I apparently wasn't considered skinny enough at the time to wear a crop top, decided by management, and spent a lot of time worried about my weight. I will probably never be as thin as I was then, but I didn't know it at the time. You also had to have your hair, nails, and makeup approved before the shift. Now, I rarely ever do my hair, nails, or makeup, and I never regret it. I also never wear pantyhose after 2 years of that. I do want to add, though, that at least for Hooters, the outfits were form-fitting but to me really only gave the illusion of looking skimpy. We were covered from toe to chest. It actually felt modest except for the obvious cleavage. I ultimately left because of management compromising my safety by providing my phone number to a customer. It was dramatic, and I probably should have taken legal action, but I didn't know then what I know now. Ultimately, though, I wouldn't change a thing and would not be the person I am without that experience. Additionally, I hated all-you-can-eat wings night, and there was a time management wouldn't let me leave when I was sick on an Ultimate Fighting Championship fight night, and I hated that too. Story 10. I worked at Hooters while in college. Before that, I worked at Texas Roadhouse and a fine dining restaurant. Then, at a real estate office with an abusive boss. After those jobs, Hooters was a walk in the park. No balancing heavy plates on large trays, no pressure on opening wine bottles at the table and properly serving them, and no getting yelled at first thing in the morning. It was casual, fun, and easy. I worked mostly daytime shifts, so definitely more tame than the night shifts. Also, ladies, if you ever need a good pair of tights, the Hooters ones are amazing, and they sell them in the bathroom for $4. I hate tights, but those things are awesome. Story 11. Not a woman, but I worked at a packed college bar with a beer tub beside women in revealing outfits. Literally, all we did was stand behind the tub of ice and serve beer. My job was twofold. Provide the female crowd with a male option and act as a big brother to the servers, so the guys would keep moving and not talk to them too long. I'm 6'5", so it wasn't too difficult. It was fun, wild, usually easy, and we made a lot of money. I made about $275 to $400 a night, and the girls would clear $400 almost always. The competition for working the tub was pretty tough actually because you didn't have to deal with 80% of the usual bartender hassles. The other thing was keeping it professional with coworkers. We were drinking and dancing and having a blast, so things quickly got flirty. But I draw a line to keep it from getting too personal. The money was too easy to risk it. The craziest part is the amount of money I would find on the floor. I'd always split it with whoever was working beside me. Several times I found rolls of cash, even $3,200 on one occasion. I literally had to handle guys on 2 different occasions because of harassment. I was fired by the manager when he hired his son and tried to pass it off as some guy he didn't know. The girls found out and told the owner, and I was rehired. Typical shady bar managers. Wild ride, but some of the best times in my life. The main thing was moderation and managing personal desires. It's difficult at a young age but paid off later. Story 12. I was one of the first females hired as a general manager at Hooters in the early 1990s. They needed me when Hooters was sued by men for discrimination, and they wanted it to look like they had females in management positions when 60 Minutes came to do the interview. When managers interviewed girls for employment, they would circle a letter in the word employment on the application. If they considered her a 1, they would circle the E. If she was a 10, they would circle the T. Story 13. Here we go. I worked at Hooters during my senior year of high school. Truthfully, I only enjoyed wearing the outfit and the attention. I am thin, blonde, attractive, but I did not make the kind of money I am reading in this thread. Probably because, comparatively, I was unfriendly and refused to schmooze or entertain the creepy comments. I loved when tables of families or girls would come in so I could breathe a little bit. Here are a few tidbits. 1. Never had any regulars, but when a regular would sit in my section, the other girls would get jealous and hang around the table looking for tips. Had a girl steal my tips for the night in the bathroom out of my waistband wallet thing after we were closed. The manager was super apologetic and knew who did it, but I never got my money back. The loaded tater tots got me through. I had 2 creepy guys sit in my section one time that were overly interested in asking me personal questions. It turned into them telling me all about this trip they are going on in a couple weeks to Thailand and how much fun they have, how they wanted me to come and that I could bring a friend, that they would pay for everything, etc. Pretty sure they were trying to sell me into sex trafficking, to be honest. Endless comments on your appearance, your physique, your favorite intimate position, just the usual. It made me see myself differently at 18. I was not used to that kind of attention from grown men. I made it about 4 to 5 months before I decided I could not handle it. I just did not have the resilience, and I am about as flirtatious as Aubrey Plaza. I would make about $125 to $150 a night. It was not really worth it, and personally, I felt weird telling my friends and family. Story 14. My best friend worked at Hooters for about a year. She said the uniform was terrible, especially here in Canada when it gets cold, and the clientele could be significant red flags, but the tips were excellent. I think she said the most tips she ever made in one night were around $450. She quit after a year because she was fed up with being grabbed so much. Story 15. I worked at a Hooters at a beach location for 2 summers. The managers were all creepy men who were trying to get sexual favors from the waitresses. They made sexual and derogatory comments to us. We had an after-work party once, and one of the kitchen guys drove me home. The next morning at our daily startup meeting, I was asked in front of everyone, "He gave you a ride home and you couldn't even give him a hand job?" The place was almost always packed and sometimes had a 2-hour wait. I didn't mind the uniforms because I was young and in the prime of my life. I felt confident and attractive. I made a lot of money, and those summers were really fun. Overall, the people who ate there were a real mix of families, teenagers, some inappropriate men, but the management was worse than any customer. Story 16. I worked at Hooters when I was 18. I made so much money. Our manager didn't play. If a guy stepped out of line, he was escorted out. I had a few creeps, but people were well behaved for the most part. It was a fun place to work. Most girls were nice. Our general manager was kind of difficult. Once he asked if I was going to put any makeup on. I told him I already had it on. He did a slow blink and repeated the question, so I had to go put more on. If a girl wanted to apply, we had to get our manager and she'd decide by how they looked if we were hiring or not. Story 17. A lot of inappropriate comments. I stayed there for a week before I decided it was not a good idea. Addendum. I did expect this. I was more surprised by how often they happened and how blunt they were. Story 18. I used to frequent a Twin Peaks in Dallas only because it was the only restaurant within walking distance. I'm from the United Kingdom and didn't drive. The reason I kept going was that I kept hiring their staff because they were excellent salespeople. They had learned on the job and knew how to get what they wanted. I was eventually banned from going in, as we hired 6 or 7 over the course of a year,